Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are available as podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Please send us your questions and comments. Hit us up at DJ@ArtistFirst.com. And now, we're not sure why, but here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, man. And we're not sure why either.
No, there's no meaning to that.
This is a meaningless exercise.
Seems that way now, doesn't it?
And thank you for listening. And we're just too depressed to
we are
continue.
not.
We are not. But tonight's show is going to be an interesting show because it's going to be on a depressing topic.
Oh.
At least I think people think it's depressing. So it came to me late this afternoon that life is pointless. I thought, what a great topic for the soul of the everyman. The pointlessness of life. So then we went and looked for a nice quote, and of course we found Nietzsche, because Nietzsche is all about the pointless. And by the way, I'm Michael Lyons. Not that it matters.
And I'm Margaret, and it does matter.
Margaret's does matter, and yes, we're going to move on. And but Nietzsche, of course, is he's all about the pointless. But I found a better one by Tolstoy, who's not as pointless as Nietzsche. But all those Russians, they're all about the depression.
I think it has to do with Siberia
and the vodka.
Yes, lots of it.
The vodka. So the only, this is Tolstoy now, I'm sorry. The only absolute knowledge attainable by man is that life is meaningless. Leo Tolstoy. And I thought that was a nice pithy quote to kind of kick this off. But we are going to talk about how pointless life is. But it's going to take a little twist, and the twist is this. Life is pointless as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Life does not require a point. And to the extent that we deceive ourselves, or that we are told that our lives must be pointed or must have meaning, or that we must live a meaningful life in the eyes of others, is sort of, I would say, sorry.
Those are three classifications.
Three classifications. But I would say all of them lead to the same thing. They lead to a handle on unhappiness, or on others having a handle upon your unhappiness.
I'd say it's more dissatisfaction with your interaction with your own life. Because when you sit there and you feel like, something's missing, I'm not satisfied with what's going on, the first thing you do is like, well, whose fault is that? Which is it's very funny to me, because it basically is saying that your internal state is defined by what's going on outside of you, which is, to me, highly amusing. It's like, how can you decide that your state of being, your joy or your sadness, all of it, has got to be dictated by outside of you?
Well, people do, and to kind of the life is pointless as it should be, because when people tell you your life should have a point, you end up in that dissatisfied state. You also end up in a state where people tell you, well, you should be something, be successful, be rich, be famous, be all these different things. And so you go out very, as a young person, you say, okay, that sounds great. I'll do all this. I'll be these things, and then my life will have meaning, because people told me unless my life has meaning, I'll never be satisfied. So you go out, you do all those things, and where do you end up, Margaret? You end up in this dissatisfied, this midlife crisis, to put a term on it.
Yeah, it takes a few years to get there, but
right. You you get to this point where you realize I have all these things, or I've been chasing these things, and I've spent my whole life up to this point acquiring this or becoming this thing which they said would give me meaning and fulfillment. And suddenly I realize that I am spiritually or just in general dissatisfied.
Yeah, internally discontent.
Internally discontent.
That's good old Freud.
Right. And then
civilizations and its discontents.
Wow, good one. I haven't heard that in a long time, but yeah, there's civilization and its discontent.
That's when he just goes so deep in there, and you're just wondering what this poor man must have gone through in his childhood.
Again, if you second to none for depression are the Germans too, because if you want depressed Germans and put a couple of Germans and Russians in a room, and pretty soon everyone's
got of liquor.
Got a gunshot wound. But moving backward from that. Moving on. So the initial premise, once you get to that point and you realize that you have this giant hole, this giant void, and you say, well, I who am I? What is the meaning of my life? Now I have to go find myself. And this quest begins, and people form these silly things, these bucket lists, or they say, I'm going to go off on, and throw away all the things that I've done and go on a quest to find myself. And
as if you've lost yourself, which is fascinating thought. How have you lost yourself?
Well, haven't they though? But this, in itself, is another quest, sort of a meaningless, not a meaningless, but a fruitless or perhaps futile quest. This idea that you can find yourself, just as you said. How did you lose yourself in the first place?
You know what it reminds me of is when, and you're looking for your glasses everywhere, and where are they? But on the top of your head. That's what it reminds me of.
And that's very profound, because in essence, the only way you can lose yourself is to forget that you are already there,
it's no longer in front of you. That's the key. You have no longer allowed yourself to perceive what is right in front of you. So how did you do that?
And I would go back to the beginning. The premise itself was flawed. When you opened your little dewy eyes and looked up at whomever your current mentor was and said, what should I do? And they said, oh, well, your life needs meaning. It has to have a point. You have to do these things. You have to go to school. You have to learn all this stuff. And they gave you this really this bill of goods that just your being, who you were, and as a person, as your 2-year-old self, just a being in the world that intrinsically has value in its very existence, in its very incarnation, and brings a unique and precious thing to the world, which is your individual self, is not enough. They're like, well, you can't just waste your whole life. You have to do this and do that and do the other thing and do those things, and then you'll be whatever. If you take that in your innocence and incarnate it, give it a space inside yourself, that's the germ of the void, if you will, because you stop looking at what you really are. You no longer see yourself. You see the external reflection of yourself. What do other people think about me? How will I become something in their eyes and be judged great, or be judged powerful, or be judged rich, and be my words and my presence given meaning by all this external stuff? So you go and look outward. You look no longer at yourself. You look outward. What does this one think of me? How many likes did I get today? How much money do I have? What's my current status? How many degrees do I? All these things. And you lose sight of, or you stop looking at, the being, which is intrinsically you. And you start to look at all the chimera and all the reflections and all the what do you think about me things out there. And once you accept that premise, I think you're doomed to end up at the midlife crisis, and you're doomed to then go on to find yourself while your glasses, wonderful analogy, love it, are on top of your head. You're like, where are those damn glasses?
Well, if you look at it, I mean, really look at it, the fact that your life must have a point to it is narrowing in and of itself. It basically cuts away everything else because you feel that what is not on point means the rest of it's got to be pointless, which is not true, which is a fascinating thing because your consciousness is vast. And when you are looking at a field of either knowledge or experience or certain field of relationship, to have it pointed like that knocks away from right in front of your eyes the finer points of the relationship or the interaction, the language, if you would, because you're so focused on it's got to be this way. I've got to check off this requirement list on how my relationship with another person should be. And people are funny because they are looking for a part of their reflection in another, but they don't always ask permission for it. That's what I find fascinating. They just make the assumption that, of course, you're going to reflect back to me what I feel is who I am. And if you don't, then, oh, well, gee, I'm going to, they begin to treat you like, well, I don't want to hear from you. You have to do it this way. This is the way you're supposed to respond to my request. And you sit there and you go, okay, when did we agree we're having this kind of a relationship?
where I reflect back you. You pack so much into there, but I loved your beginning. The beginning of that was that, the pointlessness of life is something when you say, no, life must have a point. What is a point but a narrowing, a sharpening, but also an exclusion? You remove so much of yourself to come to a point.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with focus.
Yes.
Okay, and the definition of a person's concept of focus. They think focusing means that, well, we have to disregard this and disregard that and do, and then, we're just, these are the things that matter. So they take their little piece of chalk and make a circle around the things that they feel that this should be considered and everything else is pointless.
Right.
And you sit here and you go, no, focus is probably one of the most difficult and amazing tools that a human being actually has. I think of focus as a paintbrush, where you're dipping it into certain things and using it to begin to create something right in front of you. A focus, because people, they're like, it's like the paint by numbers. Okay, it's number 6, so it's got to be chartreuse. So like, where's all these spots for the chartreuse? It's like, no. What does that have to do with a creation that is yours? Or are you just narrowing things down to a step-by-step process so you get a facsimile of something, a concept of somebody else that said, this is a flower? So, where do you want to be? It doesn't even, if you think about it, it doesn't even allow you to really begin to experience what it means to paint. Because all you're doing is filling in the numbers and staying in the lines. Is that the kind of life you want? That would be my question. Because that means to me that you basically will not trust your own feedback loop of try, what happens? Oh, try again, what happens? Oh.
It is, again, so much there. The try and get the feedback, fail perhaps, or succeed,
Whatever.
but try and get the feedback.
There's no failure, is my point. You try, you get the experience, you go on. The failure or the I don't know, I can't even, not even victory, but
Success
is a moot point.
Right. When I say failure, I do mean exactly what you said. Try, and then look at it, perceive what you have done, and say, is this what I'm trying to create? If it is, great. If it's not, you go through the process. But but the point you made, the point, but the observation you made that this paint by numbers is using your ability to focus to not to create but to replicate, and to replicate a reflection of what others have said is good. Here's a good picture of a flower. And with your concentration, your focus, and your dedication to this, you can replicate through this process what we think is a good flower. You, the being which is you, the genius, the unique individual genius which is you, without any point, without any external referent telling you that this is what you should be doing, may decide, my observation of this thing in front of me, I wish to create it or create something like it from my own self, my feelings about it, my thoughts, my impressions of this thing. So now it's uniquely colored by you, by your perception of that thing. Call it a flower. And then you say, I wish to express this in some way, in words, in paint, whatever you think, some medium.
Macaroni.
In macaroni, but in the sense that you have perceived, you have felt and processed and gotten something from that. Some portion of you has been enlightened by this perception, and then you want to push that back out. So there's a whole process there. There's the perception, the internal reaction and change and growth, and then this outflow. None of that can be perceived by the outside world. They only see you staring at a flower, which anyone can do, and all of us can do it. Every one of us will have a different impression. Then this internal process is completely invisible. Again, has no value, no meaning to anyone else outside the world. And then you bring yourself to try to express it. All of a sudden now it can be judged. That's the worst flower ever. It looks like a piece of whatever. We don't care, and I hate the macaroni, and you're just a terrible artist. And you have to not care about that, because that point that they're making about your impression, your expression rather, is meaningless. That's truly meaningless. The artist does not art for the other's opinion of it. The artist, true art, is just your expression of how it changed you and then what you can do to bring it out. And even in the process of creation, it changes yet again. And the artist may be very dissatisfied because what I've put down in this medium is only the faintest echo of what it really meant to me. And as you said, you may do it again and again, hundreds, thousands, countless times, to you can get the closest possible approximation to what it really meant to you. But you don't care. It's pointless to ask another, what do you think of it? Because then they may find it horrible or wonderful. And that may matter to them, but it shouldn't matter to you. If your life is pointless, it shouldn't matter to you. If it's pointed and you're doing it to say, well, the most wonderful flower in the world is this, and I'm going to recreate it now with my very, very good focus and getting every chartreuse painted within the lines. Yeah, there it is. What everyone says is the most wonderful flower in the world, and I have replicated it. Aren't I a good boy or girl? No. Now you've got a great point, but there's no meaning to it. It doesn't feed you. It doesn't feed your soul. And you'll get, after doing 10,000 of those wonderful, paint by numbers paintings, you'll get to the point of your life where you'll say, I have 10,000 paint by numbers paintings and my life is meaningless. And I don't know who I am. But one macaroni pushed all the way through you and all the way back out and onto the paper, and there it is, the most magnificent macaroni flower I've ever done in my life. And yet it may have wonderful, it may fulfill you in that moment. And it may fulfill you even many years later, looking back and say, oh, wow, what an experience that was. Even if no one can see the macaroni anymore, you can see it in your mind. And you'll find meaning in that. But it means it should have no point in the outside world whatsoever, unless people can find some point in it. But that's what they found. It may be long after you're dead. Who cares? Remember we talked about the cave paintings in Lascaux. 50,000 years later, people are finding meaning in that. Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful. But to the people, to the artists who did it then, they found completion and fulfillment in that. And even if the next day they were trampled by a water buffalo, who cares? That thing lives on, a piece of them.
It's an expression, and it's an expression of your soul. So really what it is there a part of you that is going to be joyfully participating in that particular moment of here and now? Whatever interaction it may be, whether it is creating a painting or carving stone
sculpture,
or creating, a good meal. This is soul expression that we are speaking of, and that is the purpose of you being in the here and now. The meaninglessness of things is fascinating when you think about it. It's like they're just things around you. What meaning are you designating to these things? And are they higher up on the scale than being able to be present in the moment and take in what is around you? Understanding what's ephemeral and what's not. And your heart will tell you what's important. It could be a very simple gesture, but it was so important in that moment. It may have helped another whose heart is so broken. Small gestures usually carry a lot of soulful hands and hearts, warmth, love. That's who we are.
But essentially pointless, because that gesture from one to another needs no external validation. If it is never witnessed, in fact, what's the saying from, I think it was from the New Testament, where, if you're going to give alms, make sure that one hand doesn't know what the other is doing, that sort of thing. If you're going to fast, make your face clean, look as though you're not fasting. Because none of the external judgments, if you say, look at me, how destitute and poor and terrible I am, I'm fasting, you've received, the whole thing of the passages, you've received your reward. You got the external acknowledgement of, look how wonderful that man is, he's been fasting for months. But if you let nobody know that you're giving alms, you let nobody know that you're doing good, nobody know that you're fasting or whatever it is, and they say, this passage goes, your Father in heaven sees it. Well, the the being which is you, the vastness which is you, and consciousness sees these things because the perception isn't any kind of external validation. It is that which is you, which knows that I did this gesture and I gave from my heart to the heart of another. Who cares if they even acknowledged it? It doesn't matter. The expression, heartfelt, with the eyes of the heart, pointless. No one else ever needs to know about it, ever. Yet it has great value. It may stay with you for the rest of your life, temporal life. It may stay with that other for the rest of their temporal life. You may never know what good it did for another. And it doesn't matter that you never know. No one else may ever know what a saint or what a wonderful thing that you did. But that doesn't matter. It's pointless.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that we were warned long ago about the danger of virtue signaling. Yes. And now virtue signaling has been raised to, quote unquote, a fine art.
It certainly has been.
You know, you sit there, and if you really are involved with all this virtue signaling, how fulfilled are you really? Because you begin to crave another hit. Someone acknowledging that yes, you're such a virtuous person.
Yes.
And you sit there, it's like, have you really stopped a moment and gone through the entire experience of doing that? Allowing someone else to see that you've taken this and you've done that, and aren't you, oh, what a good boy am I? So how do you feel? Does that last? Or are you empty all over again?
Yeah.
Because the bag that you filled is full of holes, and you have never woven a wholeness in your soul that allows it to be filled by soulful, loving moments. That's an interesting thought. You are here to bring your heart into a vessel-like formation that's filled with moments of soul expression, of love. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be good or pleasant, but the core of it is what your heart is the truth that lies within you, radiating outward. And if no one else can see it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because the light that is within you is a flame, and that's the only thing that matters at that point.
Well, exactly. The external, what you mentioned earlier was the, this emptiness that comes from, we say virtue signaling now, but it was the same thing was mentioned again 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Those who wish to show everyone else how good they are by giving alms, as the passage goes, with great flair and fanfare and blowing of trumpets. You've already received your reward, and it is an empty reward. It is the momentary glow of some, basically phantasmal person who doesn't actually exist, who you think thinks that you're good. In other words, you're basking in this imaginary glow that you think everyone's looking at you and thinking how good you are. It's like when you have your brand new car and you're thinking, everyone's watching me and I've got my brand new car. No. And that's why you get to the point in your life, this midlife crisis point, where you think, well, all that I had 10 billion likes a day, and everybody thought I was so wonderful, and yet here I am feeling empty. I'm sitting in my giant golden mansion with 5 billion likes a moment, and I'm an empty, leaky hole, full of holes vessel with nothing inside. And all that the actual 2-year-old that's inside of all of us, with the heart, wanted was the fulfillment, was the experience to put into that heartfelt vessel and to hold and to say, I did this because I loved this person and I gave them this and I got back that experience. And that is more precious than all the 10 million likes and all the virtue signaling and everything else. And no one saw it. No one ever can see it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point. The pointlessness of those things that can never be seen by anyone else. They can only be experienced by you, perhaps by another, but it's really your experience of giving, with the heart, which doesn't require a point. We're going past the point of the middle of the show, but I think this is important. Is this pointlessness is precious. There's a preciousness to our invisible quality of presence and our invisible quality of experience, which can be no one else's but our own, and doesn't matter if anyone witnesses it.
Right. It's allowing you to see that your state of mind is important, but you choose. So we should go back to the studio.
It's all pointless anyway, so let's do that. We'll go back to the studio. We'll be back on the other side. We'll talk about meaning.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, WILDHUM music.com. And you are listening to the Artist First Radio Network. Thank you.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
You're listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you, Z-Man. And one of these days we just have to broadcast our whole breaks because we have our lovely conversation. But, it's all meaningless anyway. I mean, we did start out this half hour with our premise that life is pointless, as it should be, and I think we explored that very thoroughly. And I like the point that we went out to break it with, which was that our experiences here do not require an external. Our experiences here are precious in and of themselves, regardless of what anyone else thinks about them. And to the extent that you get that within you, we have it. We're born with that. When you ask a 2-year-old, what's the point of what they're doing, they'll look at you like, what's the matter with you? It doesn't need a point. It's what I'm doing. I'm having fun.
I'm knocking it down again.
I'm going to build it up. I'm going to knock it down again. And go, ha ha ha! I'm going to build it up and knock it down again. And if you say to them, "What's the point of that?" They'll look at you like, "What? Point? There's need a point. It's fun. It's just fun." But at some, as we grow, we are convinced at one time or another, and then maybe for a large portion of our lives, that somehow that all of our actions have to have meaning, that they get to be judged by people, have to be right, they have to be wrong, they have to be liked, they have to be disliked, and that to the extent that we want to fulfill ourselves, we have to do the things which are going to make us be important and make us be rich and make us be this and make us be that, and eventually, and the whole, the thing that the carrot that they dangle out in front of you, then you'll be happy. You get all this, everything, and then you're happy. And unfortunately, many, I would almost hazard to say most, buy that. It sounds right. Everyone says it. You got to do this, got to do that. And you go down this path for perhaps a good portion of your life. This midlife crisis, it's because there's a certain part of your soul which is true, which has the true eyes, which sees the lack and sees the void, and that voice which tells you that this isn't what we want and this isn't what is fulfilling to the actual being, gets a little louder and a little louder, and eventually you just can't ignore it anymore. That all the things that you were told would make you happy are revealed gradually, perhaps sometimes all at once, and we talk about where life can suddenly reveal that this was all pointless, and that the actual point is the being, the actual now, the living. But if you never run into one of these inflection points, one of these crux points where that's revealed all in a flash, and you just get to the point gradually, but you get to you say, I'm 65 years old, and I'm going to be dead soon, and what have I done with my life? This lament comes up, and it can be almost voiceless. It's this yearning for meaning, and yet, if you ask somebody, well, what should I do? You have to do the bucket list. You have to do that. You'll get a whole bunch of new litany of things that you must do before you die to fulfill your life and get meaning and find yourself. And it's all wrong.
Right. Exactly. You're asking someone else to tell you how to fulfill your life. And you do it by redoing the same habit forms you've been using all your life. Because you're sitting there going, well, I can't just throw these away. I've been living this way. I've invested too much time.
I can't be wrong.
I can't be wrong.
Too much time.
Oh my gosh! But that's what you see. It's like, oh no, I can't be wrong. And the thing is that my question is always, what happens if you find out you were wrong? What are you going to do? What is the fear in that moment?
We were talking basically about the fact that life is pointless, and we've been trying to basically explain that in the eyes of others, our lives are meaningless, and that's fine. When you reach the point of realizing that that everything that you were told up to the point of your basically up to the point of your by others external to you, everything you were told by others external to you, and then you go through your life and you come to the point where you're reaching a kind of a crisis, if you will. We call it the midlife crisis. The reflections that you were getting back from others, people telling you that you should be this, you should be that, you should be have a particular job, you should have a particular amount of money, you should have a particular career, et cetera, et cetera. It reaches a point where you no longer find meaning or satisfaction in any of those judgments. And we went through that in the last half hour. The realization becomes almost impossible to ignore, and it unfortunately can overwhelm people. It can become not only a point where people where not only a point where people lose their ability to to cope with this meaninglessness, but also a point where people they internalize it. They start to judge themselves as having no particular merit or no particular worth. Margaret, the example that you would give is that people come to this point in their lives, and they almost look back and say that not only was my life meaningless, but that everything I did up to this point was a waste of time. And I think that judgment in and of itself is so incorrect and wrong, because it belies the being. It belies the preciousness of your existence. They get to the point where they start to perhaps abuse alcohol or go into deep depression over that.
Well, they've set up in their head that this has got to be the scale or the ruler that I'm using to gauge whether or not my life was important. And the question I would ask is, important to whom?
Yes. Very much so.
Is everything that you're doing based on a set of values that were given to you by outside sources? Or do you have within you the connection that understands how valuable your life actually is? And the potential that you have is much more than just the interactions that are going on around you. This is part of the reason why you're down here, is to experience what is going on around you. But how much importance are you placing on that? Do you have a ground of existence that is unshaken by the things that are swirling around you? Or is your state of being, whether you are happy or sad or whatnot, just all dependent on external things? Because that's the first thing you learn as you grow up as a child, that you're in that state to start with of just doing things because you're playing, experimenting, finding out how things work, don't work, and then you begin to figure out, well, gee, is that good or isn't that good? Usually, if it's painful, it's bad.
What? Yes.
Usually. But, when you begin to realize what it is that you're doing, sometimes, and pain, when you realize pain is the threshold where you have crossed your limit, and that's not always a bad thing.
Yes, and I mentioned that, when you get to this point, many people who have bought this, my life must have external meaning, they reach this crisis point in their lives, maybe when they're 65 or 70 or something of that nature, or maybe even earlier. But
it's not dependent on just age. It's dependent on how real, how conscious you actually are in the moment. And if you've hit a point where it's so painful that none of that matters, and there is a point in life where all that external doesn't mean a thing. And that's what we're referencing.
Yeah.
Find that internal point within you. In fact, we were talking about how a lot of people, it used to be that you had to go off somewhere in a monastery or to be alone by yourself to begin to grow spiritually. You weren't dependent on the outside world. You shut everything out and you're just concentrating on your internal spiritual development. But those times are, excuse me,
those times are
sorry. Those times have passed because the world is just almost too interconnected. And the requirement now is to awaken while you have a normal life. You're interacting with people. I think it's far easier to go into that self-contemplation and separation when you have nothing to disturb you.
Yes, I think that's a good point. That there's an advantage to that asceticism. There's also, this is going to sound funny, but there's an advantage to having a real existential crisis happen to you, because in that existential crisis, where your life is perhaps under great duress or great threat, you can find this germ, this kernel of the fact that the meaninglessness. I'm reminded of anyone is familiar with Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut. There's a wonderful saying that he goes throughout that whole book, and it's "so it goes." And the way it's used is through there are many, many horrible crises. The book is about war and about many things, and death and destruction and so on. And the phrase "so it goes" is just to express that it doesn't matter, that all these external terrible things are in and of themselves pointless, meaningless, and almost as they should be. The true revelation of the book is that this meaninglessness is important to understand the true meaning, the actual true meaning of your individual existence. So in an existential crisis, you can come to that suddenly, almost being faced by it, almost in some ways have to overcome the fact that it feels as though you're being destroyed. Part of you is this external reflective you, the part of you that you were trying to attain and was unattainable, this everyone loves me, kind of, I've done everything, I've done all the dues, and now I'm going to be happy. That you is destroyed, and you become reacquainted with the actual you, the you that came into being when you were incarnated here, and that you realized when you were 2, and that you forgot about for a very long period of time, and maybe you come back to it. You're certainly encouraged that internal voice, which grows louder and louder and louder, and can suddenly be brought up by an existential crisis, is the true you. And it sounds so unfamiliar and so sort of frightening because you've been ignoring it so long in this world, as you mentioned, that so much is around you all the time, and it's always telling you that this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. Well, when you turn away from all that, it feels as though you've destroyed what you thought was you.
If you, as I said before, the task right now is to become awakened in the midst of it all.
Yeah. Yes.
That is the focus of what this civilization's turmoil is about. And when you observe this, when your life, someone else's life, you realize that until you look at it to understand what it is that's going on. Huh? What happened?
You dropped out for a second. I'm not sure. Maybe you muted your mic. You could say that again?
Poor connection is what it's saying.
Oh, I hate when that's happening. Well, just say it again, because I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's gone.
It's gone.
It's meaningless anyway.
It's meaningless anyway. Well, no, the portion of you which has this perception, the part that kind of gets destroyed by this civilization, and then you said we have to wake up even in the middle of all this. That's what the current crisis of these times is,
There has been talk of how civilizations mature, and it goes through all the chakras. The third chakra, which is your power chakra, because the first is survival, the second is creative, third is power, and the fourth is heart, compassion. And we are at that crux point where we must go from power to compassion. And many civilizations have self-destroyed because they couldn't give up the power. So that's where we are right now. And when you look at this and you realize that this is the task that's being put in front of you, will you awaken to the higher form of humanity that exists within you? Or are you going to cling to all these things of power that you have been striving after and holding near and dear to your heart, believing that this is somehow going to fulfill you. That is the quest right now. And at this point in time, I think there's a lot of people who are sitting there going, all this other stuff that we've been saying, it's all meaningless.
It's meaningless. And it is meaningless. And that is the point in one regard.
It's acknowledging that. It's finally acknowledging that that is pointless. This is all this stuff. So what do I choose now?
Right.
You always have the now to make a choice.
Right. And all you have is the now. And this has been meaningless and a challenge. But I think we've reached the end of it. So I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And I don't think it was meaningless, but it may be pointless.
Yes. Thank you for listening.